Hello and welcome to the Now Spinning Magazine podcast with me, Phil Aston. On this episode, I'm joined by possibly one of the most prolific and insightful rock writers around, and that is Martin Popoff. Martin has written hundreds of books on music, especially music that we all love, and all the kind of bands that you can imagine. Martin has had a book with his name on the front, but he's returned to one of his lifelong passions, which is Deep Purple. And this is a new book called 7 Decades of Deep Purple. And it's not just an update, it's a completely revamp of two books, I guess. I've got them nearby, Castle Full of Rascals.
Wow.
And also Getting Tighter. But these seem like pamphlets compared with this 600 and literally 40-page book that covers the 7 decades of Deep Purple, going all the way from the first album right up to number one, the most recent album with Simon McBride. So welcome, Martin. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Phil. This is very cool. Thanks for having me.
Now, this has taken years of research. You've done thousands of interviews with so many musicians, but obviously you've got so many interviews you've done with the Purple family, and you've updated this. You've also got a personal curated image library that's been used, because you've also done these other books where you've had all the cuttings and press releases. So you know this subject. But one of the things that I'd like to touch on first of all is something you say in the beginning of the book, where you feel that you're approaching this with a more confident and mature writing style, where you feel like the original books that you've kind of drawn from here, you're using long, complicated sentences that went over the edge of sense making, is your phrase. Yeah. And this time you brought it all together with clarity and joy. So what do you mean by that? So was this what's the joy aspect of revisiting Deep Purple?
Yeah, so those first couple of books were pretty much the first biographies I've ever done on bands. I think maybe the Blue Oyster Cult is before that, Getting Tighter. Yeah. And those are self-published. They've never been in print since. It's been, probably 15 years before I had any copies of those. They're black and white throughout. I didn't do much repictures. I've met a lot of people since then, a lot of great photographers. So there's way, way more photography and better scans and all that kind of stuff. So those ones have been due for a redo for a long, long, long time. Castle Full of Rascals, I think, ended in 2011 or something.
Yeah.
So then the nice thing is so there's like 5 studio albums or something like that since that book. And I have been fortunate to talk to either one or even in some cases 2 guys for every studio album since then, right up to the new one. So I had all this great new interview footage and probably another David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes along the way. I've accessed some other press stuff as well. I used some of the stuff that when I was doing all the pre-interviews for Metal Evolution, when I was working on that series, some of that is in there. Maybe some of that got in actually, to under the line for Castle Full of Rascals. But yeah, so those are just a couple of very and like you say, the writing, because it's so long ago. As we all get older, we learn to realize how much we don't know. And in the old days, we think we know everything and we're writing away and we're researching less and not checking every spelling of how to spell, some arena center. Is it RE versus ER? I don't remember really caring about any of that stuff. Right. Yeah. So it's been through a lot, and this publisher, Schiffer Publishing, it's been a joy to work with these guys. I mean, this is our 3rd book, because the Dio just came out, the big massive Dio. That was this one here. Well, there's the big Maiden. Yeah. So that's even longer than the Deep Purple. The Deep Purple, like you say, very accurately, is 640 pages. This is 666 pages. Yeah. And then the Dio's huge too, right? We got the big, massive Dio book. So these have all come out just through Schiffer, and you put them together, and it's like 1,600 pages of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope the book reads well. I know it's very academic. It's my usual way of doing one chapter per album, letting the guys speak, using everything they've said pretty much. So there's a lot of interview footage throughout the book, but yeah, I think it's a good definitive. Maybe one of the main things a Deep Purple fan needs if they want to learn about this band, because it's probably the biggest Deep Purple book out there.
I think it probably is. I mean, there's been lots of pictorial Deep Purple books, which are very expensive, but they're basically image led. This one, obviously, as you say, is like everything you need to know from the very beginning. What I really like about it, Martin, is the very thoughtful coverage on the kind of albums from Purpendicular onwards. There's a real kind of sense that, well, this is what it feels to me, that you're looking at this set of albums very differently. And in fact, you even think that these are some of your favourite Purple albums, aren't they, of all time?
Yeah, I would say so. I definitely wanted to treat them with some reverence. I don't think they're inferior to
No.
any marks along the way, kind of thing. So every album gets a pretty long chapter, and we look at every single song. And if I'm fortunate to talk to Ian, I access some other interviews as well. But if I'm ever fortunate to talk to Ian for one of these recent albums, he's always got something really interesting to say about the lyrics. You think of what was it, Portable Door?
Yeah.
One of the recent songs. That interesting story about sometimes I wish, Martin, when I'm in a social situation, I just wish I had a little door to just open, just get the hell out of here, kind of thing, right? So it's interesting little stuff like that. But yeah, very literary band, and Ian and Roger are, they're always coming up with very interesting things to say lyrically. And of course, yeah, you and I have talked about this before, how the music is really good, and it's continuing to be good with the new situation as
Yeah.
well. And they're threatening to make another album again. So
This is true. I mean, you've just held up Iron Maiden and Dio, and you've written about so many bands, but you describe this particular project, this Purple album, as being soul replenishing. What makes Deep Purple, above all the others, connect with you on well, it feels like such a deeper level?
Yeah, I think what I love about Purple is that they are so vital into their senior years. They're reflective about being seniors, and I think they're writing with great maturity, both musically and lyrically. Ian Pace, even for a drummer, is a very reflective guy. He has great things to say about being in a band, the chemistry of playing together, and the science of drumming. Yeah, he seems to be as reflective and introspective as the other guys are. And I love this idea of them moving forward. It's a very odd story about Steve Morse and his problems, and the band's got to move forward. We gotta work. We gotta pack our lunch and go to work, kind of thing. So here they are. Uh, deciding that the band will move forward, and like I say, making another record. But so along the way, I've even often said this before as well, that Perfect Strangers is my favorite Deep Purple album, and
Yeah.
I defend that by mathematically thinking, well, along the way, there's always 2 or 3 songs on an album that I'm not crazy about, and if there's only going to be 7 songs on the album, that's that mathematically can make a later album like that better. So soul replenishing. I mean, I love that the first reunion was amazing. I even love Battle Rages On and Slaves and Masters, and then this great renaissance they had with Steve Morse moving forward through whatever it is, 7 records or something at this point. So that's really cool. And again, we love the way they're producing, and with Bob Ezrin coming up with
Oh
this
yeah,
very
yeah, yeah.
specific, strange production style that nobody else can copy, or probably has even tried to copy. But just the sounds they're getting, and what Don Airy is doing, and Don again is also like one of the most interesting, cheerful kind of keyboard players, versatile and he can inject humor into what he's doing as well. And yeah, I just find the guys, we've grown up with them, both of us. You even probably longer than me with them. But it just feels like we've grown up with them. There's a distance and an acquaintance there, to be sure, but it just feels like we're all going through this human experience together, and you've got this band that is this or this crazy organic machine with all sorts of ups and downs and traumas, different lineups, different sounds, and it just feels like it literally feels like a person itself. This band, as it's moved through time.
Yeah, because I like the other thing is that normally when people are introduced to a band, it's the Doorway album, the first one they hear, they kind of latch onto, and then nothing else can push that out of the way. And I know that when you realise that in your school gym that there's more to life than girls when you heard Burn by Deep Purple,
Yeah.
which obviously a very informative part of your life, and Burn obviously kind of etched itself into your mind. But even still, Perfect Strangers then rose to the top and above Burn, and also in the book that you said that, as you say, Perpendicular marked a rebirth. And the thing about that period is you also mentioned that for many legacy bands, you can't shake away the fact that their classic years are just immovable mountains in time. But you kind of, and I agree with you that Purple are different in their kind of later work as being just as important, and you emphasize this quite a lot.
Yeah, and I totally believe on an objective level, and these are debates that we can have. Like, I often say this with people about, okay, if you really removed all of the elements of nostalgia out of your assessment of these catalogs, Deep Purple are probably the number one greatest example of a band where you could pick any of these recent albums and say they are the best Deep Purple album, because they just seem to be the band the most that literally where you go, well, it should be sensible that we should all get better at what we do over the years, right? Nobody says that about rock and roll, right? Yeah. But with Deep Purple, you can absolutely make the case, and there's even other bands where you feel get close to Deep Purple in that respect. But there might be a couple of shortcomings where you say, well, it's not exactly better, or it's about the same kind of thing. But and I think Lemmy as a lyricist, for example, is the perfect, and Motorhead, I guess in general, is the perfect example of the Deep Purple situation, where I could pick any of those later albums and say they're better than Overkill and Bomber and Ace of Spades, and Lemmy would kind of agree with that, and I think the Deep Purple guys would defend as well. They would say that we think we're making our best music and lyrics now, and with them it's I think a little clouded by they're not the type to say tension makes a band good. I think they're the type to say that that tension kind of made things crappier or worse, or nobody wanted to work, and we were phoning it in and stuff like that, right? Whereas they there's this general vibe that they're just so happy in their working relationships now, and being led, and being the whip cracked by Bob Ezrin, and they're perfectly fine with that. That I think they know they're making their best music now.
There's because I think it's still an unappreciated part of the band. I mean, and for anyone listening or watching this, the all periods of Deep Purple are, to me, part of the family and just as important to each other. But there's one part of the book, though, which gets mentioned a couple of times, and it's the walk in Portugal with Ian and Roger, where they talk about it being a key turning point. This was about how they saw where they were going to write from where they were, from the age they were, rather than thinking about being hard-loving men and all the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and still with a sense of humor about aging as well, and maybe looking back in old stories and kind of laughing about it. But yeah, it just seems like this is a band that knows they want to explore deeper themes. You think of the stuff on Whoosh, and it seems like they're always striving to to not repeat themselves. They, they've got the certain things they've done. They will look back on it and laugh about it, and throw in the odd sort of rock and roll story as well. But again, it's a little bit like, I've often said this about, if I get upset that Robert Plant does a full covers album or something, right? It's like, Robert, you've lived this incredibly interesting life. Just keep telling us about it. Stop. I mean, we don't want to hear you do somebody else's lyrics. So just write lyrics for us, please. Right. And that's what I love about Deep Purple, that, they're just inquisitive people, inquiring minds. We think about the odd time I remember them saying that they would sit there and do crosswords together, and they felt like crossword puzzles kept their mind sharp, kept them literary, right? And kept them involved in the world events and stuff. So they touch upon all things sociological, psychological, world events, nuclear war, whatever, right? It's all in there, and don't ask Ian about Brexit and all that kind of stuff, right? So they are keeping their eyes on everything. They're a global band. They lived globally. They live all over the place, and they tour all over the place. So they see a lot of things. So that's why it's an interesting life. And if drinking stories get in there and they're part of it, that's fine too. But I remember even talking about them in recent years about drinking and stuff, and they say, man, no, there's no way. No, I can't drink as much as I used to, right? Sort of thing. So all those interesting, great limitations and reflections of old age, I think, are in there, and I think the book ends with a fair bit of that from those guys up into the last album.
When you were pulling the book together, did you kind of revisit the catalogue from the very beginning? So, the first three Rod Evans albums. I mean, because obviously that's when they were kind of finding their feet. They were kind of obviously very influenced by Berliner Fudge. John Lord was definitely in the kind of driving seat. The Hammond organ was a key part of the sound.
Yeah.
Because this is such an extensive book, did it make you appreciate those early albums differently? Did you have a different slant on it?
Well, I definitely went back and played everything as I was working through it, but no, I don't appreciate those albums more because it's something I've reflected upon over the years. Is I really get depressed easily by old music, and that music sounds very old to me, and Pete Pardo and I talk about this all the time about how, he's slightly younger than me, but he likes music that's 4 or 5 years older than me. Like his favorite period in music is sort of 70 to 75. And my favorite period in music is 75 to 80. And so there's this crusty, cranky, clanky age thing that happens on records from before 74 quite often, that I kind of get depressed about. And this is why with Black Sabbath, I'm not a big Volume 4 fan. I'm not a big Paranoid fan. But for some reason, I just love Master of Reality. That one escapes the, sounding cold and clanky to me, right? It sounds very warm and huge, right? But no, I've never been a fan of those albums, and I'm still not a fan of them. I just don't like that crazy vanilla fudgy. Even I want to bring up the name Santana, but that's a little bit of a different thing. And I've talked to people about Santana and like, why am I depressed by Santana all the time? And it's the keys they do things in, right? It's that Latin rock key and. Maybe even tunings, I don't know, but it's just the chord changes and stuff really gets to me, and I hate Chicago and I hate Blood, Sweat and Tears and horns and stuff in a lot of this stuff. Although I like Vandergraaf and a few other things, right? A little bit of krautrock, but no, there's definitely a barrier that goes up there. And even in rock, to me, sounds old, but I still love it. And then Machine Head doesn't sound old to me. Fireball again sounds old to me. Who Do We Think We Are? A little bit, but yeah, it's the going through those records.
The other thing I just wanted I'd like to touch on, because I know how you feel about albums like Made in Japan, because you're not a big fan of the kind of when they go out there and they jam and they take a 4-minute song and turn it into a 20-minute long side on side 4 with Space Trucking.
Yeah.
And also there's a lot of the early Purple stuff is very blues based, almost R&B with Lazy and Placing Line. There is a kind of a really heavy blues aspect to it. But when you became a Deep Purple fan, obviously was Burn the first one that you heard it. When you went back, you still thought, no, this is the band for me. This is my
band. that Burn story is just very briefly. We had a school assembly kind of thing, and we were doing this little French dance thing. But a buddy of mine, a couple of buddies, had the thing where they're running around with toy machine guns and shooting everybody in the crowd while Burns playing in the background in the gym, which sounds amazing. I always say the corollary to that is how large a car looks in the showroom versus on the street. And so hearing Burn in a school auditorium, decent volume sounds really epic, right? But no, by then, so 74, so I would have been 12. By then I would have been into Deep Purple for a couple of years still. I would have known probably as a new release. I figure maybe Machine Head was out for a few months or whatever. But I remember being into Deep Purple before then. And it was a great band. But there were always immediate songs, the songs that really hit you. I mean, everybody's hit by the big dumb riff and Smoke on the Water, but Highway Star's amazing and Space Truckin's amazing and the song Burn is amazing. Something you brought up, kind of interesting, like the relationship of the blues to Deep Purple. I still feel like they were very deliberate when they did the bluesy material. It's like, we're going to do a blues kind of thing. It wasn't such that everything sounded dated because they couldn't get the blues out of the heavy songs. Yeah. So that's why, we talk about them in glowing terms as being this band that was able to excise the blues out of it, for many examples across those early albums, but also they were the band more so than Black Sabbath and certainly more so than Led Zeppelin that integrated the classicalness of John Lord and the classical chops of Ritchie Blackmore into the band as well. And everybody else had chops as well, but they weren't thinking particularly classically. So that's a great thing about metal there. And I really don't feel there's much blues on the In Rock album at all.
True.
There could be a little bluesiness, but what I loved about Deep Purple is they were sleek and scientific and modern immediately versus, some of these snob bands we talk about like Sir Lord Baltimore or Bang, or for that matter, Led Zeppelin when they got heavy. I mean, a lot of the Led Zeppelin songs that we celebrate as great early heavy metal classics are just kind of turned up and slightly adapted blues songs. Yeah. Even something that sounded so, revolutionary as Whole Lotta Love is kind of like that, right? Yeah. But Deep Purple, no, they were able to string together a lot of super innovative songs on In Rock in the middle of 1970, and then Highway Star, Space Truckin'. That's a completely entirely new kind of music, foisted upon us.
I think also with the band, in contrast to their contemporaries like Zeppelin, Sabbath, maybe bring in Heap as well at this point, is that they didn't really lose anyone, considering how different their albums were. So whether we take, Book of a Taliesin, the Concerto of a Group and Orchestra In Rock, Fireball's very different. Who Do We Think We Are? Machine Head, Stormbringer is very different. Yeah. And obviously it kind of threw a lot of their fan base off course for a bit, but they didn't leave them. And now people look back through the lens of time and they don't say, well, some people might, but if you're in the Deep Purple kind of realm and you love the music, all of these different flavors, and they are very different, are part of it. You don't hear people really criticizing a Purple album saying, oh, avoid that one. There's nothing on that one noteworthy at all. They're very different in that respect to how they have been able to have Tommy Bolin and the funk, almost jazz, funk, rock, and that. And it didn't damage them, or it didn't damage the legacy at all, did it?
Yeah, well, that's the great 70s ethic within a band. So let's start with that. So within a band, it was okay to experiment a lot, and then what we appreciate years and years later is it gives us all something to talk about. That there are all these differences. I mean, you're not going to be able to say this about the latest string of Accept albums,
No,
or
no.
or the efficiency and similarity and absolute perfection of all the Saxon albums, right? If Saxon makes another 10 albums, we're going to have 25 albums that kind of sound all like the songs are semi interchangeable because nobody these days, even some of the old greats like these bands I just mentioned, and certainly younger bands for sure, they've had too much rock history and too much self-awareness, and too much being able to, well, this is self-awareness, but looking at other bands careers, and too many splintering into subgenres, and then putting themselves in those subgenre boxes, there's just way too much uniformity. So that happens. And then also, those, the variety across those albums is, there's a parallel to the fact that bills at the time were like that as well. You could have a 3-band bill and the bands could be completely different from each other.
That's
But
true.
again, that's just down to that's semi just down to just quantity of bands. The number of bands per decade, it is truly an exponential kind of growth, right? From 10 bands to 100 to 1,000 to 10,000 to 100,000. There's just, and now there's millions and millions of albums out there.
Well,
But
that's
I've often said that,
sorry, carry on.
about even Kiss, for example.
Yeah.
It's interesting to all of us that Kiss have gone all these different directions, and it's also interesting that I love the fact of just a band being prolific, and looking back at Kiss and saying, wow, there's like 5 studio albums here. It's amazing. They went, they packed their lunch and went to work that much. And one day, we're going to be looking back at just how prolific they've been through the Steve Morse years, and now hopefully, the Simon McBride years are completely, amazing as well. Hopefully, there's 2 or 3 more albums in them. But yeah, they're definitely reaching. I think about them getting older, and I think about all the complaints about Ian singing over the years. But the last time I saw them, Ian was singing up a storm. He was amazing. So that was really good to see that this is not a band that just went in one direction, sort of thing. I think Ian's voice has gone like this over the last 15, 20 years. Yeah.
I mean, you say that Deep Purple's messiness, as you call it, and stylistic swings and all the internal tension is what makes them a fascinating band. Does that, in a way, helped make the story and the writing more interesting, because there are so many things to pull in to this book?
Yeah, I think so. It definitely gives me something to write about, to see all that variety. And I also think about there's a lot of theorizing and talking about the history of music from all of these guys, and I think a lot of that comes into the way we were slanting the questions when we did the Metal Evolution series. So there's a lot of interesting stuff like that in here, where you really get to see their influences that go into all this, and I think that those influences, paint the way that they will write songs. They have such an appreciation for so much different kinds of rock and roll. But for sure, it absolutely keeps things interesting for me. And then I also realize that when you get up into the Steve Morse era, they're really coming up with an identity that's almost like this 6th member of the band, that is this style that even when they go down different avenues, and perhaps the unifying glue is what Bob Ezrin brings to the table. But man, there's nobody who records drums anymore like how Ian Pace sounds, and there's nobody who has like the versatility, and we'll pull out so many songs as a Don sounds as a Don Airy, and all of this combines. You just feel the talent coming out of the grooves on all of these songs, and even sequencing and knowing that we can't have two of these on the album, we can't have three of these, sort of thing. They're just really professional, and again, it's down to well, you're supposed to get better when you get older, right?
Yeah, but it's also fascinating, isn't it, that this kind of, I mean, how would you define what we call the Deep Purple spirit, in that it persists across so many incarnations of the band, when many of the members obviously weren't in previous incarnations at all, but there's still this aspect of what is Deep Purple, what does it mean to people, even though you haven't got John Lord, you haven't got Richie Blackmore, or even going back to when they were both there and Ian Gillan wasn't there and Roger Glover wasn't there. Ian Pace is the only person who's been there all the time, but it isn't Ian, it isn't just his drum sound that has created this aspect of what is the Deep Purple spirit. I mean, what would you say is that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, funny enough, though, it almost seems to me like the Deep Purple spirit, and if we want to get more concrete about it, the Deep Purple, the part of the Deep Purple spirit that comes from the Deep Purple sound. I've never really thought about this, but now just kind of working it through in my head, it almost seems like it is Ian Pace, and it is the spirit of John Lord as it comes through Don Airy. Because it certainly wasn't there in Steve Morse or Simon McBride. I mean, both of those guys have cast away really any links to Richie Blackmore. Poor bass players. We're going to put down bass players, but it doesn't particularly come through the bass playing of Roger Glover. I don't really feel that there's a Roger Glover bass style. But the acumen of Roger Glover as a producer, I'm sure, certainly helps the band. And we know Roger has contributed a lot lyrically as well, which is really cool. And then that leaves good old Ian Gillan. And I feel, now he's been a part of almost all the records, which is very cool. Yeah. So I think you definitely get this world view. You get Ian's, dozen or 15 or 20 different life philosophies through these albums. So you do get an Ian Gillan worldview from the lyrics as well. But then, having said that, it's funny. It's almost like Don Airy is a pretty interesting approximation with his own personality in there of John Lord. But I almost feel like Ian Pace is Ian Pace today is less the Ian Pace of before than Don Airy is the keyboardist of being John Lord in a way. Ian has completely evolved in his sound as well. He's gotten more into, he almost seems to be more into this idea of being the best example of someone who conserves his energy when drumming. It's almost like he's taken it on as the great task of his life to prove that you can drum without barely moving at all. And it's like every single beautiful note or grace note is the absolute shortest distance to get to that note, kind of thing. So that's what I love about him as well. So he now, you hear so much interesting drumming throughout what he's doing now, way more than you ever did even in the past. So in the past, he was the great Ian Pace, but he was, let's say 60% just a conservative drummer, just a great, excellent drummer. But now he's like 30% a conservative drummer. There's just so many, you could just listen to the albums just for what he does now.
Yeah, because I guess what you've just touched on there is very true, because in the John Lord aspect and the Don Airy aspect, because there is this kind of the classic, what is the Deep Purple spirit? Both of those keyboard players had this kind of classical jazz background. So you do have this, whatever you think of Deep Purple, you think of these kind of classical jazzy tinges. And of course, you're mentioning Ian Pace. His background was the jazz big band sound, wasn't it? So he's got a natural swing in his playing, and he's always adapted himself to wherever environment he's found himself in. So whether he was playing with John Lord in Pace, Aston and Lord, where he really was, his style of drumming changed for that, and also come taste of the band, his style of drumming changed to fit in with what was going on around him. I think I totally agree that Ian Pace is kind of the chameleon that kind of is the center of this. Is center of the wheel, isn't he? But the keyboard sound. I mean, what did John Lord call it? You know, the improvisation and almost jazz-like spirit of adventure in made in Japan. Because I know I mentioned earlier about the blues aspect, but there is a kind of free-form improvisation that Purple came from with and each musician they've had, whichever guitarist has had that in them as well, hasn't, to stretch out and take songs in different directions.
I love the way you put it, where you said classical jazz, and I know you were just kind of going short form. You kind of meant classical and jazz, but it's kind of interesting that hearing those two words together, because both of those guys are just, you're right. They're this interesting gumbo of they can do classical things, they can do jazz things, they can do classical jazz things, they can do, there's a such thing as jazz fusion, but jazz confused with classical as well, which is kind of cool. And then, putting all that aside, this is apparently a hard rock or a heavy metal band.
That's true.
So they're in this milieu, doing that inside of this, and frankly, off the top of my head, well, this is because keyboards just mathematically can't do heavy metal. So off the top of my head, I almost feel like they're rarely ever playing, either of those guys rarely ever played anything that you could consider, truly contributing or being copacetic with the hard rock or heavy metal side of it. Now, I know, everybody talks about how John Lord essentially quite often and could play rhythm guitar on his Hammond and get that honking aggressive sort of tone. But we're kind of all fooling ourselves that you can literally play heavy metal on a keyboard. So this again is something that you just kind of inspired me to think about in this. It's like they're rarely doing anything that's particularly hard rock or heavy metal on the keyboard, and yet they're bringing in all this vast classical and jazz and, like you say, improvisational instincts into hard rock music, but they're still on this great trip while they're doing it. So it's almost like there's two or three different things going on all the time.
Well, the keyboards has always been a huge part of the Deep Purple sound, hasn't it? Whereas if you think of the contemporaries, Zeppelin and Sabbath, the keyboards aren't there. So the only other bands that had really keyboard-centric characters were bands like Yes and Genesis. And so in a way, Purple they had someone in the band who could score classical strings and all the rest of it, but also improvisational aspects, and to say jazz and classical. So I think the keyboard aspect of Purple is a huge part of the spirit of the band, and Don Arias kept that going. What I'd like to move on to now, going back to really focusing on the book, is that you've had to curate the pictures. Saying you've gone through your personal library, all the pictures. I mean, the visual thread that goes through the book. I mean, was there anything that surprised you about the kind of evolution of the band as you went through the pictures, as you picked them for the book?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a huge task with these books too, by the way, lining up photographers from all the different eras. And then there's been some great collectors who have contributed stuff, but it is full color throughout, right? And there is a lot of pictures in here. And I love this about Schiffer, how they have no fear about making a massive book that's full color throughout. I mean, they're pretty expensive, but we've done 3 of these massive boat anchors already, right? But one thing, just think, I've never really thought of this, but thinking off the top of my head is that there's always been a lot of great advertisements for Purple and a lot of different permutations of singles. I mean, this is a big band. And we, over here in North America, we don't really realize how big they are. This is a band that is super big because of the accumulation of all the territories that they're considerably big enough in. But America is just kind of another one, and kind of in the middle per capita in terms of how big Deep Purple is. But again, we sometimes lose sight of the idea that even though you don't see, 5 and 6 and 7 times platinum albums, they're always, these bands are always big businesses when they went on tour in the 70s and stuff, and sold lots and lots of tickets. And it was a big deal, right? And they got a lot of column inches in the magazines because, again, way less bands, way less magazines. It's all actual magazines. So you have to go through the effort of getting into print. So, we could, you can count on one hand the main magazines that were out in the 70s, kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of interesting that you do get a sense in curating all these photos of the worldliness and globalness of this band. And I don't think there's any other band that sort of competes in my world that I know about anyways. I'm sure it's a very interesting question. If you bring in pop and R&B and all these different, maybe jazz, who else was as global? But to me, it's Deep Purple and Iron Maiden. Those are the two bands I think of when I think of bands who will go to any far-flung place and play, kind of thing. Nazareth's kind of like that too, for a smaller band, right?
Yeah,
for a baby band, Nazareth's been a lot of places. And it's really cool to see that, they had an impressive career that most of us didn't really see, pay much attention to, all that Russia and Brazil stuff that they did, right? So yeah, but Purple, that's a great thing about them. And I'm sure that's another reason why the lyrics are so good. There are a lot of lyrics about their travel exploits, right?
Yeah, that's very true. Looking at the back of the book, it lists all the interviews that you've done with all the different members of Deep Purple. And of course, there's been so many members of Deep Purple. This isn't a band where they changed the singer 10 years ago and then eventually the singer came back again when it didn't work out. This is a band where the family is huge. And you've obviously re-looked at and listened to some of the interviews you've done, and you've obviously done new interviews. Were there any specific interviews that left a really deep impression with you in helping you to formulate the book?
Yeah, I mean, basically any time I've ever gotten to speak to any of these guys, it's always been just an inspiring experience because they're super polite. They're down to earth, and yet they're worldly. So they always have interesting things to say. You never feel any sort of aggression from them, kind of thing. I've had many in-person interviews as well. One of the very earliest interviews I ever did, I was very nervous, was Roger Glover sitting down at a coffee shop on Queen Street here in Toronto. And that goes back probably right to Purpendicular, I believe. And that's kind of when I started. I kind of started late in this. I started in my very first book was 93, and then I met Tim Henderson, and he was breaking away from Meat Magazine. We started Brave Words and Bloody Knuckles in 94. So I was off to the races kind of 94, 95, but at that point I'm already 31 years old, right? So the interviews are always great. And I remember one time, I fondly remember the idea that one time I interviewed Ian Gillan. It might even been my first time interviewing Ian Gillan, and it was a phoner. And I get off the line, and 10 minutes later, he phones me back and says, "Martin, apologies. I just wanted to, I might have got this a bit wrong, but here's kind of the story of what happened." So he corrected himself on a couple of things. It's like, wow, that's pretty conscientious. I'm making the phone call, or we had this prescribed thing to interview, but to have him just phone me back out of the blue and correct a couple things, I thought that was kind of neat of him as well. So they've always been good. Ian Pace is just a sweetheart to talk to as well. Don Airy, boy, all of them have been just great over the years.
So it wasn't a case of really looking through your interviews and thinking, what can't I put in or interview? Actually, thankfully because of the publisher, it was more about, what else can I put in that I didn't put in before? So you've been able to be far more expansive on this book than you've had any other previous book on Purple.
That's a great point. I mean, a lot of the books I do have a very prescribed sort of word count that you have to hit. And so at that point, it's I spend half my time writing these books that are, have a 45,000 word count. I spend half my time agonizing over how to keep the word count down, like just to get everything so diamond sharp. But yeah, Schiffer's great that way. It's like, we want an epic, just go, right. There's just no word limitation at all. And to have this come in at I can't remember how many words this would be, but I have a feeling it's probably in the region of 320,000 words. So it's essentially
It's
4 books of stuff is in there, because if you write a standard, one of my paperback rock biographies, you're kind of going to that 80,000 word mark, 90,000 words. Even a long one is like 110,000. And this has got to be over 300, as is the Maiden. And, the Dio's getting pretty close to that as well. So that's kind of a cool thing where, and the way I look at it is, we've got this footage. Who the hell cares who I am? No one needs to hear from me in a big way, although I do get to have my opinions, and I'm reviewing everything, analyzing songs along the way. But my main point is that I want the words of these great legends to be used, and then just to be there forever, as long as these books exist after we're all long gone, kind of thing. It's kind of for their kids and grandkids that here you are on record. I mean, Deep Purple's so famous, they're on record all over the place. And kids are not going to probably read the book. They're probably going to look at YouTube interviews of their grandfather or whatever, right? Or great grandfather. But I just love the idea of putting everything I've got, everything but the kitchen sink, between 2 covers. And I get to do that once in a while, but not always.
So, I mean, because you've revisited lots of stuff here, has your perspective on a particular era or on a particular musician from Purple changed after rereading your own past interviews?
Yeah. I don't know if it's so much the past interviews, but playing the albums along the way. And I just love Slaves and Masters. I just play that album all the time. I just have a lot of love for it. I think it's a joyous, happy, kind of casual album. And I think that's kind of cool about it. I love the fact that we can always be exploring over and over the later albums and probably never know them as well as we could, because that just seems to be some strange thing about youth.
It's very true.
Yeah, and there being fewer albums, but your focus, an album comes out and your focus is on it for weeks at a time, kind of thing, and all your buddies are talking about it, and that's kind of not the case anymore. There's just too many records coming out all the time. It's funny. I mean, and I don't know if I'll ask you this, but I will admit it myself. I find the biggest fall away, the biggest failing or shortcoming I have of newer music these days is for whatever reason, I just never learn the song titles. I can't name any songs anymore. Yet if you put them on, my mind is so wired for music that I will follow along and anticipate all the lyrics and all the changes. I'll know all the parts, but ask me to name a pile of song titles and forget it. I just don't ever pay much attention anymore. It's weird.
Well, that's very reassuring, Martin, because I'm exactly the same, and I think it's because there is so much material. I think there's something you said about half an hour ago. This is one of your early books, The Collector's Guide to Heavy Metal, the first one. Do you remember that?
Right.
And you basically, it was the whole of the 70s. And I think you did that series until we got to the noughties. And then I think you said, I can't do anymore because there's so many bands that the book will be about 5 foot deep. I think that's the problem.
Well, yeah. So what happened was, so that one is the follow-up. So the first one was self-published, and then my very first published book was this one.
Yeah, and they got bigger and bigger, didn't they?
So this was 97, and this had everything in it. And then it got split into the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. But that 2000s book, I mean, is that super handy here? Let me see if I could see it here. Oh, yeah, here it is. So the 2000s book was is the only book I've co-written with anybody. It's myself and David Perry.
Yeah.
And this book was the last time we could do it, but the print is so small, we got a lot of complaints about it. So this book, even though it's here it is compared to the Deep Purple.
Yeah. Well, oh my God. Yeah.
Believe it or not,
one band.
This book here is 600,000 words. So this is over 500,000 words in here. So this is about the word count of not not 6 books, but more like almost 9 books. There's almost like 9 books of word count in this thing. So that's the problem. You're right. And then I said, of course not. It's almost like this is the reason phone books don't exist anymore, right? You can't make a book that's 2 feet thick of all the albums from the 2010s, alone, right?
Yeah.
So I don't even know how many reviews are in this, but all told, when you put all the reviews together that I've written, it's about
it's interesting to know that you fell in love with Slaves and Masters again. And the other thing that's interesting about the book, and when we get to Rapture in the Deep, they basically stop for quite a while, almost feeling like the age of the album has gone. The online streaming and everything. They just don't bother. But what does happen is there's countless live albums come out in that period. So in this book, you've had to make the decision to focus on made in Japan, made in Europe, and really pull back from the plethora of live albums that came out.
Yes, but I do mention them all, and I noticed that. Okay, so like a weird procedural thing is that I was lucky to have those timeline and quotes books that I did, that Deep Purple Royal Family thing. So I use those as reference sometimes to make sure I didn't forget anything. So this is absolutely everything in the kitchen sink. And so everything kind of gets mentioned along the way, sort of thing. But yeah, it's again, that thing. I'm sure you feel the same way that, live albums earlier on in life were kind of special.
Yeah.
And then the specialness just went down, and then you're also dealing with the cranky thing of God damn it! So now it's a live DVD mixed with a CD. So is this an album even, or is the CD just the audio version of the DVD? Because a DVD is a video; it's not an album. So now we have live albums that we can't even decide whether they're part of the discography or not, because they're these weird hybrid things, right? So all sorts of reasons, or they're doubles and triples. You can no longer figure out. This started in the old days, anyways. But you can no longer figure out if something's platinum or not anymore, because you're doing the math and going, well, it's a double, but the DVD's there too, and there's the remix of this and all these multimedia things that come out. But yeah, too many live albums all the time. I suppose Deep Purple, it's kind of interesting. I suppose Deep Purple, when you see many live albums, I think everybody's thinking Grateful Dead, right? They're all thinking like, can we subtly turn ourselves into a cult? That are we going to have great scholars? Are we going to bring everybody along, and there's suddenly going to be this scholarship in comparing all the live albums and material? I mean, you are probably one of the greatest examples of that. You're probably one of the greatest Deep Purple scholars when it comes to all of this live stuff, because most people, it's too daunting for them, right? So that's a great thing. But it's almost like when you put out that many albums, you're subtly you're saying, we're important. Listen to everything we do, and we expect there to be university courses comparing all of our live material, and that's a Grateful Dead thing. That came from that situation where there's just all this logging and statistics about Grateful Dead live, and so anytime I see bands do that, it almost feels like somebody somewhere is maybe subconsciously thinking, we are so special that we want everybody to be excited about the next 10-minute version of Burn or whatever that comes out.
True. Now, kind of coming to the end of the interview now, I'm just thinking, do you think Deep Purple's appeal lies more in the virtuosity of the musicians, or do you think now it's more of an emotional connection for people? Because they are very different. They don't do 20-minute long extensions of songs anymore. They're very different. But the original appeal was this kind of virtuosity of the musicians and where they could go and what they did. It's very different now. So do you think there's still this aspect sitting in the background of the fact that it's about the musicians soloing and all the rest of it and stretching out? Or is there an emotional connection where people feel, like you said at the start, that these people have been part of our lives and we've grown up with them?
That's an interesting question. And it's, thinking back to seeing them in recent years, I feel like the spirit of that musicianship thing does live on because they're very careful to show them playing on the screens, very, very professionally filmed. So you get to see a lot of what Ian's doing and what Don's doing in
Yeah.
particular. And then there's a lot of people celebrating watching what Simon's doing. Simon
Yeah.
is such a tasteful, versatile guitar player, and really he's got a little bit of Steve Morse in him, but he's got pretty much no Ritchie Blackmore in him. And that in itself is interesting because it's almost like a meta version. He's Steve himself was so unique and had his bag of tricks that were completely different tricks from anybody else. Simon actually has borrowed a few of Steve's tricks, but really none of Ritchie's tricks. And so that's kind of cool. So I think that lives on through it as well. And then there's always, the great long, rich, river of nostalgia that you get because this band is so big. That's right. The book is called 7 Decades of Deep Purple. So yeah, I think a lot of people are there for the songs, but I think a lot of people are also celebrating the musicianship and great audio quality that you get from, it can be hit or miss, but from a Deep Purple show as well. And there is still the spirit of improvisation, but they keep it to a minimum kind of thing. I just wanted to mention that was a bad example, me saying burn, because I remember a funny conversation with Ian asking him once, it's like, why don't you guys friggin' bring up Burn or something? Like do something interesting, right? New and different. And he kind of looked at me indignantly and said, why would I want to do that? It's another singer in the band or whatever. I didn't write those lyrics or whatever. It's like, well, you do Hush and stuff like that, So, you did do Kentucky Woman in the old days or whatever, right? And you did a covers album. I didn't say all that to him, but I think I did say, well, you do have Hush, but my main point is that I just fantasize about some of, them pulling out some song that they haven't played ever because it was from Deep Purple Mark III or whatever. And I wish they would do more things like that. And it's an interesting thing that they've kind of, not gone to. I mean, who wouldn't have loved to get Ozzy doing a song off of Heaven and Hell or something like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I know when Ritchie was still in the band, they used to tease and do the around the kind of 93 Hell and Hell Water album. He did the Burn riff and they'd play around with it, but that's as close. That's as close as they got, really.
Did Ian ever come to the mic and say any of the lyrics?
No, he didn't. Okay. No, he did not at all. Now, I mean, we both followed Deep Purple across 7 decades. I mean, what does Equals One, their most recent studio album, what does that represent to you personally in regards to this story?
It's a rebirth. It's probably having Simon in the band. I imagine has taken 5 years off the lives of those other guys. I think that's album. Really cool. I don't find it particularly creatively totally different from the Steve Morse era anyways, because I think those guys have wonderfully grown into these unique personalities. I don't think particularly song to song matchups all throughout we know the albums are very diverse, but I didn't feel that they Deep Purple had a really completely unifying song in the very profound way that Bob Ezrin has given them a unified, like literally a single unified sound when you hear many of their songs. In the old days, it would be trademark of their sound is Ritchie, a trademark of their sound is John Lord, blah blah blah. But it didn't come at you as a single life philosophy thing. I think you are getting that now, and Simon has integrated into that beautifully. So yeah, I think that album, notwithstanding the irritating album title and the horrible album cover, Deep Purple does not make good album covers. That's one thing.
No, it certainly doesn't.
We've learned that over the years. But I think I would hope that Simon coming into the band gives them this little draft, Formula One, out of the dirty air, whatever, pick up a toe, or slingshot effect where I hope bringing him into the band causes at least one more album, if not two. It sounds like it's definitely causing one.
Yeah, so it doesn't sound like this is going to be their final chapter, although it might be the final lineup, I guess. I mean, if this was the way they chose to finish their journey, as you've come to the end of this book, as you finished editing it and it's gone off and you've got a copy now in front of you, how do you feel if this was where they finished?
It feels a little messy and unfinished because they just bring in this one new member, a certain important member for one album kind of thing. They definitely end on a high note. People love this album to death. On the other hand, I think they finish on an absolutely high note simply because I don't know if I got a blessed uncommonly great show the last time I saw them, but I could not believe how good Ian Gillan was singing. It was incredible. So they absolutely end on a high note, as far as I'm concerned, in a live way. I hope there's another album, but again, I suppose it is kind of neat that maybe they end on an album. Maybe they only get the one album with the new guitarist, which is kind of interesting in itself.
Yeah, true. Well, thank you very much, Martin. And it's great to hear that you've still got all this enthusiasm, finding new layers of meaning to talk about Deep Purple and the inspiration they've had, the kind of music that you listen to. If you are a Deep Purple fan, this book is an absolute must. And it's at the time of me doing this interview, Christmas is only just around the corner. So you need to make sure you ask Father Christmas to order it for you. Where is the best place to order it from, Martin?
Well, if you're in North America, that would be from me. You can get it from martinpopoff.com. And we're shipping them out, but the books will come direct from the publisher, and I sign and will mail off a book plate to put in it. Book plate's just kind of a sticker with the publisher name on it. It's something from Victorian times. Rich people had book plates in all their books, and book collectors and sellers hate book plates because they it's not the pristine original version of the book, but usually they have a story to them. But anyway, so I will sign a book plate and send that off with them as well. So that's North America, martinpopoff.com, and you can combine it. There's a number of my other books there as well if you like. The Maiden is new. The Dio is new. We've got updates of the White Snake, the Merciful Fate, the Max Webster as well. If you're overseas, if you're in Australia or anywhere in Europe, I'm fed up with being able to try ship these because the shipping cost, it's such a heavy book, is over $100 to send anywhere in Europe. So just get it off of Amazon or something like that, or Waterstones, or any of your other. Did I say that right? Is it Waterstones?
Yeah, Waterstones. Yeah, you did.
Yeah,
that works. I just want to say, in summing up, though, that this book is the best book on Deep Purple. Even though I've not got a physical copy, I've only seen you hold it up, but I've got the PDF, which I've been scrolling through. It's the equivalent of one of these giant career-defining CD box sets that you get from labels like Madfish, except this is the book. So the only thing missing is the music, which you can go and get from elsewhere. But the reason why I feel this book is so different is because everyone's in it. You've interviewed so many people, so you're very analytical, and you look at the music from what it means to you. But every musician who's part of every one of these records is in the story. And I also think the sprinkling over the press ads over the top of it really takes you back to the time of each album, and the interviews bring everything to life and bring it up to date. I think it's an absolutely creative masterpiece for Deep Purple fanatics.
Thank you, Phil. That's great coming from you, because you are the expert. So,
yeah. Well, thanks very much, Martin. It's been great to talk to you, and hopefully we'll catch up again and talk about probably Purple or something similar.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. A huge thank you to my guest, Martin Popoff. 7 decades of Deep Purple. It's no secret that Deep Purple are my favourite band, and Martin Popoff's favourite band is Deep Purple. So we could have spoken for hours, days. We could have gone out to somewhere and had a beer and gone through every single album, every single track, probably one after the other, and then gone back round again in circles and talked about which lineup, which tour, which single. This book looks absolutely amazing. I've only, at the moment of me doing this, got access to the PDF, but it's 642 pages long. And if you were watching this, you saw when Martin held it up, it's enormous. It's a massive book. And there's hundreds of interviews. He's spoken to every member who's been involved with literally every album. Great insight. The books that were the kind of source material that came out all those years ago were great as they were. But looking through this at the kind of the photographs that have been used, the press cuttings that really take you back to the time, it will just make you want to listen to all those albums all over again. And when I said at the end of the interview, it is like a book version of one of these super deluxe CD box sets. In a way it is, because it's all the photographs, it's all the interviews, it's the book, it's everything about it. The only thing missing, of course, is the CDs, but you've probably got those already, haven't you? You could go and listen to them. But I think you'll absolutely love this book. So if you are in North America, you'll be able to get this directly from martinpopoff.com, which is wonderful. If you're in other parts of the world, because of the cost of sending a book of this weight to the UK or Europe, it's fine to go to your local shops, which for us in the UK is Waterstones or for Amazon. But this book looks absolutely amazing. There are loads of books on Deep Purple. They pop out all over the place. But this one is the one. We've had special edition photographic books on Deep Purple, but this is going to be the encyclopedia, the kind of research study book when you want to know more about the Deep Purple family. And I think it is interesting how we look at Deep Purple now. To me, when I first became a fan, it was the virtuoso aspect of the musicians stretching out and taking music from, and the unexpectedness of seeing the studio track lengthen to something that was 4 times the length on the live album. I wonder what they're going to do. How do you do that? But now I think there is a really very much an emotional connection to all the musicians that have been part of this band, because they've been part of, for many of us, have the soundtrack of our lives. And the fact that whereas other bands might have lost a guitarist or lost a singer, this band has changed direction so many times and it literally had every member of the band, apart from the drummer, have been different. But how each member of the band has evolved and grown and changed. There is such a rich seam and tapestry of music to listen to with Deep Purple. And I also love the fact that Martin has really kind of shone a light on the Steve Morse period, because it also shows that Deep Purple, whereas other bands kind of, you just think of their golden period as it's perceived, Purple's golden period to me never faded. It's always been there. And the fact that they now are on the cusp of starting a new tour in 2026 with talk of another album. Fantastic. So 7 decades of Deep Purple, Martin Popoff, is out by the time you watch this. So go get a copy for Christmas. I certainly will. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Remember, music is the healer and the doctor. Please subscribe, become a patron, and you'll get access to our private communities on Facebook and on WhatsApp. And we also have our own virtual pub called the Now Spinning Arms, which meets up twice a month. So you can have a chat with like-minded people. Keep spinning those discs. Remember, music, as I said, is just a great source of joy and sunshine. And that was another thing that Martin said, wasn't it? That he just absolutely loved pulling this book together and writing it with a new sense of kind of passion for the band. And that really comes out. Anyway, thank you. Take care, all of you. And I'll see you all on my next episode.